Well, hello there. So look, we did a live last night. Weren't the live as planned, so I do apologise. But I'm doing this video purely because a lot of people were talking about it. They asked about it. I've had a few emails saying, look, what do you think? This is crazy. And what are we talking about? We're talking about the fact that, look, Bryan Kohberger's legal representation has not only been involved in defending and representing Cara Norvington, which is Anna Knodel's mum, but also Madison Mogen's father and stepmum. So we've got a situation where Bryan Kohberger is being represented by somebody who has represented not one, but two of the victims' families, and what has their charges been surrounding? Narcotics. We've spoken about this, haven't we? We've mentioned it. Shut up, Siri. We've mentioned this multiple times. Talked about the fact that there's this huge delay between when this happened and when police were called. We've looked at Dylan Mortensen. We've not been able to look at Bethany Funk because she's just disappeared. And like I say, I've said this multiple times. Do I blame her? Not really. I do have to wonder, and I've said this again multiple times, I wonder why she didn't come out and, say anything whatsoever to try and support Dylan. But people have quite rightly said, what could she say? At the end of the day, the delay exists. There is, the argument is it shouldn't have been there in the first place. You've got several problems surrounding this situation. And the way I look at it is, look, they've obviously got a lot of information on Bryan Kohberger. There's 900 pages of Exhibit A. There's this recording, which is going to be the camera, and we've got 1,800 photographs that have been handed over to defence. Now, people quite rightly said there was a lot more pictures taken. You're right. There was over 3,000 photographs taken, but it was around 1,800 that were handed over as evidentiary. And there are certain elements where you think, look, they may have him hook, line and sinker. They rarely might. But could he throw a spanner in the works? Because ultimately, you've now got a situation where there does seem to be narcotics surrounding this entire situation. And people might not want to hear it. They might not like the fact that you have to talk about it, but you do. This house seemingly was having parties. They were having people there. It's student life. And people have turned around and said they weren't on narcotics. They were students, and you could see they weren't. And I say, you're wrong. You can't look at these students and say they weren't on narcotics. I've seen it myself. Some of the most affluent people I've seen, some of the most wealthy families that I've grown up alongside, were the most notorious for narcotics consumption in terms of recreational use. They weren't involved in distribution, but, with money, what do rich young people spend their money on? Alcohol, partying. And with alcohol and partying and student life comes narcotics. They almost work hand in hand. I'm not saying there's situations where that's not the case and you have to be involved in that to be a student. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is you cannot say that these victims and the people surrounding this house were not involved in narcotics. And the more you start hearing that you've got the mothers and the stepmothers and the fathers and actual prison time for Madison Mogen's father, look, sometimes if it's a duck, if it looks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. And I'm not saying that this is to do with narcotics. I'm not. But what I am saying is that situation could give Brian Koberger a reason for being there. Now, if this house had anything to do with the supply of narcotics, or they were freely available at this house, and Brian Koberger with a history of drug abuse, that could have been why he was there. That could very easily explain why DNA could have been found in that property. Like this knife sheath. Yes, we've got a knife sheath with, touch DNA. We don't, as far as we know, we don't have a murder weapon. So that sheath means nothing at the moment. It just means that there's something in a property with touch DNA on it, and Brian Koberger could have an explanation for being there. And what happens if Brian Koberger turns around and says, yeah, I went there all the time. I frequented the place. They were renowned for supplying. And again, I know this is going to annoy some people, but look, they're surrounded by it. They're surrounded by it. We've got situations where we have this void of time, not only the void of time between when it happened and the 911 call, but certain victims earlier on in the night, we can't account for their time either, where they were, what they were doing. There's so many questions left unanswered here, and they're not just going to go away. They have to be filled in. There can't be any blanks. And at the moment, there are so many blanks. And look, maybe the 1,000 pages fill them all in. Maybe, as we've seen in the Murdoch case, maybe there's more evidence that Koberger dragged out of the house and perhaps into his car, into his home. Doesn't appear that when they searched his home, they found too much. But again, we don't know, and that's going to come later on down the line. But again, this is just speculation, and I'm just doing this video because people asked. But yeah, they're surrounded with it. Absolutely surrounded with it. Narcotics use, narcotic crimes, and missing time, delays in calling law enforcement. And it's pointing more and more towards the fact that this house had to get its shit in order before law enforcement were allowed to turn up. And if that's the case, Brian Koberger could have an argument. He could have an argument. Let me know what you think down below. And I don't think this is going to be as plain sailing as some people think. I'll catch you all in the next one.